Only a fool would pretend to understand the strange other world that is the warp, for it is, by its very nature, inconstant and incomprehensible. Yet it was within the warp that the destruction of the Eldar race took shape. It was here, amidst the swirling psychic energy, that their corruption became manifest. Within the psychic other realm of warp space, their departing spirits began to coalesce into a gestalt consciousness. What an imaginably foul and sickening mind it was that the Eldar raised unknowingly in the warp. It was a shadow of themselves, of what they had become, of nobility and pride brought low by perversity and shamelessness. What the Eldar could only realise too late was that they had created a god in their own image, a god grown immense and potent upon the rich fodder of the Eldar spirit. Within the warp, thoughts and emotions swell and grow, fed by fellow feelings until they achieve a consciousness of sorts. They become spirits of greater or lesser potency, and their long gestation is followed by birthing pains which rock the warp and rupture the fabric of space. No creature of the warp was ever to be birthed that was as monstrous or as powerful as the Chaos God Slaanesh, the great enemy and the doom of the Eldar incarnate. For years, the Eldar were riven with madness as Slaanesh dreamed in the warp. Worlds burned, and Eldar slew and laughed and feasted upon the corpses of the dead, and Slaanesh stirred uneasily into life. When the time came for Slaanesh to be born into divine consciousness, there was not one Eldar anywhere who did not feel the agony. With a howl of psychic power, Slaanesh rose into supernatural life and cried out in his pain. A psychic implosion tore at the universe. The spirits of the Eldar were drawn from their minds and consumed as their god took his first infernal breath. Intoxicated with this first draught, Slaanesh laughed and looked upon a universe of gods. The epicenter of the psychic implosion lay within the heart of the Eldar realms. All Eldar within thousands of light years were destroyed in an instant, their spirits sucked into the warp to feed the hungry god. Even the craft worlds were overwhelmed as they fled, and only those furthest away from the epicenter survived. Upon the fringes of the galaxy, the shockwave slew millions of Eldar exodites, leaving only the most remote worlds largely untouched. In a moment, the Eldar had become a doomed people, reduced to a tiny remnant of refugees scattered throughout space. Knowing that their great enemy had been born and would pursue them for the rest of eternity. The psychic shockwave focused upon the Eldar mind, but millions of humans and creatures from other races were destroyed too. Warp space was thrown into turmoil as a hurricane of psychic force raged and whirled for days. The fabric of space was torn apart and the warp spilled into the material universe. A vast black hole opened and the Eldar worlds were consumed within it. Spacecraft within the warp were destroyed instantly, and psykers of all races howled with pain as many died in madness. The hole in space spread until it encompassed the Eldar realms of old and reached the limits of its power. Today, this rend in space is called the Eye of Terror and is the largest zone of its kind in the entire galaxy. Here the warp and material universe overlap. Demons bathe in the energy of the warp, whilst demon princes and the Chaos Space Marines rule over planets turned into hell worlds of fire and darkness. If there was one good which came from the birth of Slaanesh, it was that the warp was thereafter becalmed. Before the advent of Slaanesh, the warp was riven with storm and tempest, making it almost impossible for spacecraft to travel between the stars. Now the warp became passive, a new equilibrium had been reached, and Slaanesh joined the ranks of major chaos gods. For a while, the powers in the warp waited whilst the new order established itself. For the first time in millennia, human spacecraft flew from Earth. Human worlds throughout the galaxy were brought into contact once more. During the Great Crusade which followed, the Emperor brought humanity together into the Imperium, and mankind replaced the Eldar as the galaxy's most vital race.